most of the documentation relating to the project has vanished as mysteriously as the body parts of the victims. What a surprise. People will be like reading about those meeting notes being like, I said that shit. Burn it all!
It's what all the ancients said. It's what they warned of. It's what we're dealing with. They're demons. They're frickin' interdimensional invaders, okay?
Hello, folks. Welcome back to another episode of Brain Blaze. This one, conspiracy theories that turned out to be true. Oh, I'm here if you're new. I read a script. It's on the teleprompter in front of me and react to it a little bit. Let's jump in, shall we? I'm going to like this one. I like it when conspiracy theories turn out to be true because it's like, I'm a super skeptical person. And then when something like this happens, you're like, holy shit, like the Ed Snowden things. Where it's like, oh no, the government are spying on us all. Oh shit. That I would have thought would be nuts before I found out it was true. Every broken clock tells the right time twice a day, well, unless both of its hands have been ripped off, dokie dokie. And it stands to reason that if a nutty conspiracy theorist throws up enough ridiculous, groundless theories in a lifetime, they're bound to get one right from time to time. And even Alex Jones was right about one or two of the thousands of conspiracy theories that he's proposed over the last 3 decades. Is Alex Jones? I guess he is old, so I guess he has been around that long. That's a long time. I feel like I've been doing this a while, like, you know, stuff on the internet, entertaining people, all of this bullshit. Good, I guess, I mean, I've been doing it, what, close to a decade now, which is kind of nuts. 8 years. Cool. I'm a fucking veteran. That's who I am. Long way to go to get to Alex Jones' level of success. Getting sued for $1.5 billion. And, getting a judgment of $1.5 billion, which is heavy. Because anyone can get sued for $1.5 billion. I could sue you for $1.5 billion, Peter, but it doesn't mean anything unless a judge is like, yes, sir, write that check, which isn't how it works, but it'd be nice if it did. Fuck Alex Jones. Of course, once a conspiracy theory is proven to be true, it ceases to be a conspiracy theory and evolves into a fact, which is perhaps why we often forget it was ever a conspiracy theory in the first place. And it's funny in a way how the term conspiracy theory, which first crept into common usage in the 1970s, has such negative connotations today. After all, the term sounds perfectly legitimate. Conspiracies exist in every level of life. Human beings are often secretly colluding on decisions which will have an unfavorable impact on others without ever revealing to those affected that such a decision was ever made. I could completely agree with this. It happens to me all the time in my life. Like, my real reason for starting all of these YouTube channels... Never mind. Moving on.
They're on to me, dude. Those guys are sharp as nails up there. You can't put anything past them.
And it's perfectly natural that this will lead to the forming of theories. So why do so many of us instinctively snort in derision whenever we hear the term? Mostly because I feel like it's been co-opted by people who are truly like, woo. Is this offensive? I always worry when I'm doing like shit like this that it could be offensive. Didn't someone get in trouble for doing this? Like, I just mean like insane, but not in the like derogatory way of like people who are actually like mentally unwell. I could stop using it if I'm supposed to stop using it. I don't know. Make me better. Teach me, dear internet commenters. Oh God. Get in line! For some reason, whenever I did that as a kid, and even as an adult, I think of rams. You know, rams have those big curly horns that go around their heads. I always just pictured like a ram's horn coming out of someone's head. The weird, like, mental hiccup, or, you know, thing that I have in my mind. Fascinating, Simon. Why are you telling this story, you clown?
What the hell are you talking about?
Oh, but what I want to say is been co-opted by, like, lunacy, by, like, people who believe in the flat earth and stuff, which is not a conspiracy theory. They're going to be proven to be true because we know the earth is a sphere. Well, it's not quite a sphere, is it? There's bulges on it at the top and bottom. It's speculated by conspiracy theories that the coinage of the term in the 1960s was itself a conspiracy by the CIA to create a popular negative term which would immediately inspire mainstream ridicule over any dissenter who dared to question the official narrative. If they did that, it's kind of genius. But that's more likely just a conspiracy theory. It does make me worried that our minds are a bit too closed, though. While it seems strange that a conspiracy theorist nutjob will blindly accept any old horse shit without proof, it's perhaps equally strange that many of us will instinctively dismiss any theory relating to a conspiracy or cover-up as if such a thing could never happen on planet Earth. I agree. I think this is the thing. Like, I'm generally a skeptical person because the reality is, of all the conspiracy theories, very few of them are going to be true. But I like to at least, you know, consider the non-completely out of left field ones, like the JFK thing. I made a whole video about that the other day, and even before doing the video, I was kind of like, that JFK thing's a bit sus, isn't it? Like, what's up with that? This is definitely, I don't know what else is going on there, but it's not as simple as JFK was shot by Lee Harvey Oswald and then Lee Harvey Oswald was assassinated, right? There's more going on. Like, don't know what it is, but for sure. And just look at things carefully, you know, make your own assessment of it. It's cool. The US government resorted to secretly body snatching dead babies in the 1950s. Oh my lord. That's weird. Project Sunshine sounds like a jolly name for a warm-hearted project. It certainly doesn't sound like a fitting name for a US government project which involved stealing the dead bodies of babies and young children for experimentation purposes without bothering to check first if the parents had objections. But I suppose that Project Body Snatcher doesn't look so good on government paper. Oh yeah, we're seeking some black budget funds for something called Operation Body Snatcher. Will you approve of this, Congress? It's like, I shall not. I don't know whose bodies you be snatching, but I ain't okay with that.
He's snatching your people up, hide your kids, hide your wife, and hide your husband because they're raping everybody out here.
After the US dropped atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, that was codenamed Operation Death to the Japanese. It later began to feel a bit worried about the risk to human health from nuclear fallout. Just ask the Japanese, Jesus Christ. Oh my lord. And as part of the signing of the armistice of the Second World War and the surrender of Japan, you're going to need to tell us about what radiation did to your bodies. Fuck, man, that is some dark shit. In particular, is keen to the measure the current global dispersion of the radioactive isotope strontium-90, which was considered to be one of the biggest dangers. Oh, I see. That's why they need children. In 1953, the United States Atomic Energy Commission and USAF Project RAND collaborated on Project Sunshine, which was formed to measure the concentration of strontium-90 in the bones and tissues of dead bodies. Ideally, these needed to be young bodies, as still developing bodies would have been much more likely to pick up strontium-90 in bigger quantities. So where were they going to get their hands on piles of young dead bodies? Well, by murdering them, if not really.
You trying to kill us?
Even the AEC weren't entirely sure of the details during a secret meeting. The AEC commissioner, Dr. Willard Libby, noted, I don't know how to get them, but I do say that it is a matter of prime importance to get them. If anybody knows how to do a good job of body snatching, they will really be serving their country. How do we know that quote exactly? Was this in some recorded meeting? Why would you say that in a meeting? Just have a private discussion somewhere else with isn't this like the military and stuff? Don't write this down. It's not like they went under the veil of moonlight to dig up graves, but a network of international agents was set up to collect freshly deceased young body parts from all over the world, often from hospitals. Wow, so they weren't just doing this in America. They were going to other countries and stealing the babies. Fuck you, America. What are you up to? Just ask. Most people are going to say no, but someone will be like, yeah, sure, okay, go on then. Make some use of otherwise horrible situation. I'd be fairly inclined. Don't really want to think more about that, so let's just move on. It's reported that a total of 1,500 samples were discreetly acquired without ever asking permission from grieving parents, although only 500 were ever analysed. It makes you wonder why they bothered to steal so many and what they did with the other 1,000. Oh, those, of course, were eaten by the lizard people. It's appropriate for a video about conspiracy theories.
Another, please.
Now, I'm all for the idea of organ donation or donating your body to medical science, particularly if you're already dead. This feels to me like the last great gift you can offer to the world on your departure, and is surely far more useful than being turned into a big pile of ashes or put in a big hole for the sake of ritual. Ah, Danny, but not quite. What if you want to get your body frozen so you can be woken up in the future and healed of whatever disease you had, like me? But you should at least ask the families for consent before sneaking off with the limbs of their recently deceased children. One bereaved British mother was told that she couldn't dress her young baby daughter in a christening gown for her funeral, and it was only much later that she discovered the real reason. The doctors had already amputated the legs to sell off as parts, and they didn't want the parents to see what they'd done. Sell the parts off. That makes it much worse. That makes it, if you're just gathering the parts for research on something that's actually useful and you believe in it, that's not that bad. But selling a dead kid's legs, doctors, what the fuck are you up to? That's sick. Where's my share? Project Sunshine remained a conspiracy theory for many years until the truth was partially revealed, but most of the documentation relating to the project has vanished as mysteriously as the body parts of the victims. What a surprise. People will be reading about those meeting notes being like, I said that shit. Burn it all!
Destroy the child. Corrupt them all. This is their plan, people. These are demons.
The Canadian government fired hundreds of people who failed a gay detector fruit machine. Oh my god, I've made like 6 videos about this. It's definitely, I feel like I've made a dedicated video about it. It's come up on Decoding the Unknown. It's definitely been in a top 10s video. Anyway, let's do it again. During the 1950s and 1960s, thousands of Canadians were invited by federal employers to take a stress test which involved a futuristic machine that looked like it had fallen out of a UFO. Most of these people already held positions in the military, police, or civil service, but others were taking the test as part of a pre-employment screening check. Oh my god, what is this going to do? Detect if they're gay or not? I mean, it's not, but that's what it's supposed to be able to do, but it's bad science, which you're about to learn. I just can't help myself because I know this story so thoroughly. I know in a good way. In kind of the way where I'm like, oh my god, again. It's like one of those facts you read on the internet that you're like, you've read so many times that you're like, yeah, bro. And it always starts off, very few people know that. It's like, bro, everyone knows that. It's literally the fact that is always the everyone doesn't know fact. Come on. But it wasn't your average stress test. The subjects were invited to sit down in a dentist's chair and absorb flickering images getting thrown at them from a monitor, which rather threateningly zoomed in and out of on their faces on a pulley as a separate components of the machine measured the subject's reaction to the images, including pupil dilation, heart rate, pulse, and perspiration levels. Most of the images were a pretty unremarkable nature, but every now and then the machine would flash up pornographic images of naked men and women, which probably took a few of the more reserved civil servants by surprise. It's like, why am I looking at pornography? What's going on? Why am I doing this? What is this? What job did I apply for? Many of the subjects were equally surprised when they were subsequently fired from their posts after apparently failing the stress test. Others began to speculate that it wasn't a stress test at all. There was a theory going around that the machine was actually a secret gay detector, and any federal employee or prospective federal employee would be swiftly shown the door if the machine had concluded that the subject was too many traces of gay. Oh my god, the past.
Thank you for coming in.
Thank you for
Good morning.
Me. Morning to you.
Why are you gay?
But that sounds too balmy to be true. Back in the days when it was still illegal to be a practicing homosexual, the Canadian government had decided that it needed to weed out the gays from federal employment. Canada? Really? I mean, I know it's Canada, but it's still like, Canada, you're supposed to be the good one. We're all supposed to look up to you, like some of those Nordic countries. We're all like, why they've got their shit together so good? And then I know people from Canada are always like, oh, Simon, our shit's not that great. And the Nordic countries are like, I can't do an accent, but they say the same thing. And it's like, I don't know, don't you know? It seems pretty nice. Oh, okay, here we go, moving on. Partly because gay people were seen as a security risk as they were vulnerable to blackmail threats, and partly because they were probably all communist sympathizers anyway. Why do gay and communist sympathizer go hand in hand in the past? The job of building the gay detector was given to psychology professor Frank Robert Way, who was inspired by a contemporary American marketing study which measured the pupil dilation of customers as they wandered around grocery stores. And a bit, Jesus Christ, this must have been like some huge contraption on your face back in the day. To assess which product packaging was considered the most exciting, Frank reckoned that when you like wondering, does that really happen? Your pupil dilates? We're like, ooh, those crackers are exciting. Really? People get excited about shopping? People do get excited about shopping, which I never really got. I mean, I get excited about buying some things, but like going to the store, going to a supermarket, I'm like, what? It's fucking biscuits! Frank reckoned he could apply a similar sort of logic with his gay detector. The monitor would flash up a series of mundane images, but then it would randomly throw in an image of a half-naked carnival strongman or whatever. The subject's reactions to viewing a same-sex image, particularly the pupil dilation, would be measured and assessed. If the machine felt the subject was getting far too excited by looking at the wrong kind of dangly bits, they would be secretly declared gay and dismissed from service. Although the media often referred to this machine as a gaydar, this wasn't technically accurate, as it wouldn't work from a distance. Internally, it was known as the fruit machine, as fruits were a derogatory term for gay people. This might have been a bit confusing in the UK, where a fruit machine is our name for a slot machine. Yeah, in my mind this whole time it looked like a fruit machine. That's why it was called a fruit machine, and now I get it, and it's much more offensive. But the Canadian subjects were still very much taking a massive gamble by agreeing to participate in this so-called stress test. Over 400 people were fired, whilst an additional 9,000 were kept on a list of suspects. This would have been barbaric enough if the gay detector had actually worked, but of course it didn't work. Pupil dilation was difficult enough to measure at the time, but a subject's pupil dilation would also have been affected by the different amount of lights of each separate image and the fact that the monitor was zooming in and out of their faces. It's also possible that a straight man or woman may have exhibited extreme reactions when viewing the kind of pornography that they really didn't want to see, and this would have been enough to arouse the gay detector into reaching the wrong conclusion.
And I got news for you. That means you're gay.
The funding for the project was eventually cut in the late 1960s, although Canadian gay employees would continue to be the targets of secret government discrimination for decades to follow. The gay detector may thankfully have been dismantled, but it still managed to screw up the lives of hundreds of both gay and straight victims during its dishonorable mission to protect Canada from the threat of blackmail from those untrustworthy communists. Asbestos can be a bit dangerous. Oh my god, a mate of mine's dad died from that asbestos disease. He was just like regular dude. He was like I think he was a professor or a doctor of something at a university. And I can't remember what it was. Like, he'd done some construction when he was younger or whatever. And then it was like, no, he just went to the doctor and then it's like, yeah, you got mesothelioma and there's nothing we can do and you're going to die. It's like, Jesus Christ, man. That would suck. I'm glad, like, I'm assuming I've not come into contact with asbestos. I've not worked in construction. I'm also not old enough to, like, people knew what asbestos was. But whatever the thing that's going to, like, come back and get me. There's, like, shit where you're like, sometimes this can't be right. This can't be healthy. And everyone's like, no, it's all good. Like, I can't think of any good examples, but sometimes they come across my, like, awareness, and I'm like, that feels like the sort of asbestos shit. You know, that's the sort of thing that's going to come back to haunt people in, like, 30 years when we all realize we're dying of it. Like smoking or something. I would hope it's fairly common knowledge today that you should really try and avoid rolling around in the fluffy, white, fibrous crystals of asbestos, largely because inhaling the fibers can lead to a long list of potentially fatal lung conditions. But this wasn't always the case, and when it was suggested in the mid-20th century that the major asbestos companies were all conspiring to cover up the real dangers of the stuff, it was largely laughed off as another nutty conspiracy theory. We've actually been using asbestos since the Stone Age, but it only really began to spawn as a massive industry back at the back end of the 19th century when it became commonly used for effective fire-resistant building insulation. And it went on to become a staple of the building industry throughout most of the 20th century. As early as 1930, a link was established between asbestos and lung cancer, but the problem here is that it takes a ridiculously long time for the population to accept what the hairy scientists are trying to tell us, particularly when they're spreading doom and gloom over such clearly harmless things as smoking, asbestos, and global pollution. Yeah, global pollution is going to be one of those ones, isn't it? It's like, no, we really had diesel cars and diesel buses just driving through cities which were very densely populated, just spewing out diesel fumes. That feels like something that's going to come back and, like, fuck us all up. They already know that people who live in cities die a bit younger, right? I mean, I live in a city and I just had to, you just be driving like, bus will just, like, churning out. Like, oh, that's right in my face. That's good. That's great. That's fine. Also, isn't Canada like one of the biggest? We think this is the episode where we all over Canada, apparently. But aren't they one of the biggest asbestos exporters in the world, despite not allowing the use of asbestos in their own country? Allegedly, I'm not really sure about this, but it might have used to have been that way. And then they ship it all out to just, like, poor countries. Again, fuck you, Canada. What's up? Maybe we should make a video about why Canada's such a piece of shit. They are very friendly, though. My barber's Canadian. He's very friendly. In fact, it turns out that the biggest asbestos companies had indeed been protecting their multi-billion dollar industry for several decades by ensuring that neither the public nor their workers were ever made aware of their unfavorable findings. Court evidence later showed that employees who underwent in-house medical tests were found to be showing early signs of chronic lung disease, asbestosis, but they were never informed of their condition and were encouraged to carry on working until they dropped dead from it. Oh my lord. Can you imagine going to the doctor at your company and him being like, no, you're absolutely fine. It's like, I coughed up a large amount of what seemed to be my insides yesterday, doc. And he'll be like, you're absolutely fine. I do that as well. Thanks, doc. I feel much better. I'm sure it wasn't an actual doctor. It was probably just someone wearing a white coat, right? Because please don't tell me that. I don't know. It's just not. No, this isn't a good thing. Health and safety inspections were routinely blocked. Government officials were convinced by the companies that asbestos was perfectly safe. Convinced. Cha-ching! Allegedly. And any medical research which proved otherwise was deliberately suppressed for decades. Even more shocking was the fact that many of the executives appeared to find it all quite amusing. The president of Johns Manville admitted in 1984 that getting his doomed employees to work until they became ill and died was an effective financial strategy. Bro. How would you ever utter that in a situation where it could be repeated, written down, become a part of history? Because now everyone's going to remember you as a total piece of shit. Allegedly.
Good.
Good.
Meanwhile, a confidential internal memo from an executive at the Bendix Corporation cheerfully observed, if you have enjoyed a good life while working with asbestos products, why not die from it? How is that a memo in your company? You must be a large corporation. How do you not have a team of lawyers who are then beginning to, like, when you start writing that, they just begin flaying your legs? Because that's what a responsible lawyer would do in that situation. Thankfully, asbestos was widely acknowledged as a health hazard by the 1970s, and ongoing health claims against the companies have resulted in the longest-running mass tort action in US history, involving over 700,000 claimants. But maybe the perceived health risks of asbestos were themselves a conspiracy. That's what Donald Trump reckoned. In his 1997 book, The Art of the Deal, he argued that asbestos is the greatest fireproofing material ever used and is 100% safe when applied. Is that actually false, though? Because asbestos isn't actually dangerous if it's used properly, right? If it's not disturbed, the risk is it does get disturbed, and when people are applying it, they're not using the proper safety equipment and stuff. And then also, it's true that it is a great fireproofing material. I don't know if it's the greatest fireproofing material ever used, which is possibly the most Donald Trumpian sentence ever, but isn't that does seem correct? Isn't it? Trump claims that politicians had just caved into pressure from the mob who had invented the health scare, as they were the ones winning contracts to get rid of the stuff. Asbestos is only safe when it's absolutely perfectly undisturbed and not shedding any toxic fibers. 90,000 people still die every year from exposure to asbestos, which explains why it's banned today in 66 countries. That's not enough countries, to be honest. There are like 180-something countries. Let's go. However, the US is one of the very few developed countries not to impose an outright ban, so despite their best efforts, the mob didn't get things to run entirely their way. Thousands of US citizens died during Prohibition after the government deliberately poisoned the alcohol. Oh my god, this one's nuts, and I know this one. And it's just like wild. We're finishing off with an unusual one, as this wasn't technically a conspiracy at the time. The government was very open about the fact that they were purposefully placing poison in the punch bowl during Prohibition. But everyone seemed to forget about it afterwards, and whenever it gets brought up that as many as 10,000 US citizens may have been fatally poisoned by their own government during Prohibition, it's often dismissed as an urban myth, except it's fucking not, and it's crazy. Let's go. The true story is often misreported as a deliberate attempt by the US government to murder any citizens who dared to drink the devil's brew during Prohibition between 1920 and 1933. That wouldn't make any sense anyway, as there were no federal laws relating to private ownership or consumption of alcohol, although some state laws were a bit more sobering. But in fact, the US government had been poisoning alcohol long before Prohibition, or at least industrial alcohol, and with fairly good reason. Whilst the government was more than happy to collect taxes from the kind of drinkable alcohol that causes bar brawls and tearful regret, they were also keen to offer tax support to the producers of industrial alcohol used for paints and perfumes and cleaning agents, etc. Yeah, and also don't use like a lot more of it. So if you were like taxing it at the same rate you taxed whiskey or whatever, cleaning is going to be real expensive. Although I suppose you only use a tiny bit. I don't know. In 1906, Congress ruled that all industrial alcohol should be exempt from taxes, but also stipulated that it should be denatured with the addition of lethal chemicals to make it wholly unfit for human consumption. This was all fine until self-righteous moral crusaders with an aversion to firewater helped to push through Prohibition in 1920 in an effort to save Americans from going to hell. This led to a desperate demand for alcohol, which in turn sparked a booming new business for entrepreneurial crime syndicates who began stealing huge quantities of industrial alcohol and then paid chemists to renature the stuff and transform it back into something approaching a drinkable state. At least they did that rather than just selling poison. Although they're not going to get a lot of repeat custom if they did that. Of course, there was a tremendous risk for anyone who knocked back any of this bootlegged moonshine, but the Treasury Department decided that the risk wasn't great enough. In an effort to crack down on this illegal and dangerous new tummy buster crime empire, which had seen the theft of over 60 million gallons of industrial alcohol by the mid-1920s, people really wanted to get drunk, didn't they? They publicly instructed manufacturers to add loads of poison into the mix to make it almost impossible for a dodgy chemist to renature. Industrial alcohol evolved into a cocktail brimming with such poisonous substances as chloroform, methanol, and formaldehyde, which was likely to either blind you or kill you, even after attempted renaturation. That's got to be a powerful deterrent, right? Wrong. The thirsty US citizens were still crying out for their giggle juice, even if it came packaged with a little bit of an extra kick. It's not known for sure how many people died from drinking alcohol that had been purposefully poisoned on orders from the government. The figure of 10,000 is widely quoted, although that seems more like a wild guess plucked out of the air. We do know for sure that by 1927, when there was still another 6 years of poisonous prohibition to run, there had been over 700 confirmed deaths in New York alone, including 5 people who had all died after just trying to enjoy a quick celebratory tipple on the same Christmas day.
Fuck yeah!
So you're dead, now what?
Some people reckoned that all the victims had it coming. Wayne Wheeler, the president of the overzealous Anti-Saloon League, who lobbied for prohibition in the first place, observed, "The government is under no obligation to furnish the people with drinkable alcohol when the Constitution prohibits it. The person who drinks this industrial alcohol is a deliberate suicide." What are you talking about? But others took a different view. Good. New York City medical examiner Charles Norris publicly declared at the time, "The government continues its poisoning processes, heedless of the fact that people determined to drink are daily absorbing that poison. Knowing this to be true, the government must be charged with the moral responsibility for the deaths that poisoned liquor causes." I would agree that it seems a bit harsh to claim that all the victims were just foolishly committing suicide. If it was announced tomorrow that all cigarettes will now deliberately be infected with ingredients that will kill you faster than ever before, I still can't see everyone just quitting smoking overnight. The bootleggers, perhaps concerned that they weren't getting enough repeat sales from their dead customers, eventually just resorted to brewing their own booze from scratch. Good. The deaths dried up following the end of Prohibition in 1933, when people could go back to legally purchasing drinkable alcohol, which wasn't intended to be a paint stripper. It does seem odd that Prohibition was originally intended to save the American population from the evils of drink, yet the strict measures imposed by the government ended up killing thousands of its own citizens. Raise a toast to the end of Prohibition. But be very careful. Thank you for watching. This has been an episode of Brain Blaze. Smash like, make sure you're subscribed, and I'll see you next time.
You want to talk about stress? You want to talk about stress? Okay? I've stumbled onto a major company conspiracy, Mac. How about that for stress?